ladies and gentlemen, again this is another video tutorial from Road to Crystal Brass. This is close to the end. We are in the last steps, so I hope you have enjoyed with this video tutorial because I'm going to explain you something super fun. I'm going to explain you how to paint leaves. Yeah, you heard well. I'm going to explain you how you should paint the leaves on that model, because this model have a lot of stuff from neutral, so like wood, maybe leather, leaves, the horns, so everything comes from the neutral. So I should explain you how to paint leaves. So the idea will be super easy, because remember, you have painted the base coat with a dark color, and then you have to paint with something with more light, with color, light, something lighter, just that, okay? Don't worry about that. To repaint everything, less the dark lining and something else, some places where you need the previous color. And then the idea will be paint the highlights. So you have to paint the edge highlights now, the edging, basically. Why? Because it's something tiny and you have to draw it well. If you can't draw it, then if you add a lot of midtones, if you add a lot of information, texture will be blurry because you won't define anything. So you need to have defined it before to start to add something else. Don't worry, because I'm going to explain you then how to add something else too. So now, the most interesting, play with different kind of greens. Why? Because it's coming from the neutral. So you need to add different greens. If you play only with exactly same green, at the end will be the same, will be boring, won't look something organic like that. So remember, different leaves, different color, or inside of the same leaves or same bushes, use different greens. At the beginning you can play only with 2 or 3 greens, just that, to represent something different between all of them, and then start to add more and more and more colors, just to have more information, more colors, something else. But remember, now the idea will be draw the light linings to create these edge highlights. Just that. And then when you need to add something else, new lights, it's the moment to start to move this color, to use different greens. And in some moments you will decide if you want to paint some places or not. For example, when you have done everything, because this is a sketch, you will decide if you want to create a color random, like, I don't know, in some places it's like, okay, maybe here I need something else, so it's the moment to add a different color, or different green, different light, something else, just that. So because this is another kind of leaves, I have to explain you too. So remember what kind of steps you should use. The first one, repaint everything that you have painted with your base coat, just to draw the dark lining, and then paint the light linings, these edge highlights, to represent everything, the texture, everything. So, but in that case, you will need paint something else. Maybe then you will need to create a texture. Don't worry about the texture. You don't have only one way to do it, because the truth is, if you move this scale to the reality, you won't see anything. So you need to play with something oversized. And about the colors, it's exactly the same. Don't tell me that I didn't pick exactly the perfect color to represent the green, because sometimes you will think that the leaves or the trees, for example, are green, all of them, but maybe you have the cherry tree that have different kind of color on their leaves. So if you want to play with another color different than green, you can do it, because this is fantasy. But I recommend you first check your idea on internet, because maybe you will find something, maybe not, but maybe you will find something from a video game, from a movie, from something. Or you can remember that a red color or magenta could look nice because you have something on your mind, but you are not sure. So check it. Just write on Google. Just find that information. If appear, perfect. But if it don't appear, try to do it. Maybe you will like it. Just that. So you have to enjoy painting. So in that place, I use the colors I like it. I didn't think about if I pick exactly the same green that I should use to represent this elf. So you have to paint just that and enjoy. Remember, paint and enjoy. This is the most important. So then, when you paint the technical part, the dark lining, the edge highlights, then is the moment to start to paint the texture or something else, because you define it, every stuff. So, because I like define a bit more, you can see that I repaint again the edge highlights, but I didn't paint again everything, the 100%. I paint only 35, 20, something else, something little. And if you see this tutorial, you will find that I paint the edge highlights to everything. You have to paint the edging on every detail because are tiny. So as much smaller each, with more contrast on the highlight you have to paint. What kind of contrast you have to paint to represent these highlights? One trick I can give you is just keep your model on your table and just move out from the model 1 meter, 50 centimeters, something like that, and check it. Watch if you can see the edge highlights or not. If you see the edging, it's perfect. If you can't, you have to repaint again with more contrast. This is the only key I can give you, because if I explain you, but you have to paint with more contrast, more than you think, at the end you will use, for example, to represent this or to represent the leather, the brown color, you will use pure white, and you will tell me, no, I use the highest color. It's pure white, so this is awesome. No. You have to play with similar colors. If you are playing with greens, you should use a lighter greens. If you play with browns, you will use browns. For sure, you can play maybe now with different kind of browns or greens, but always similar colors with more light, but with much more light. As you see, only with the edge highlights you can represent the volume, you can add more contrast, you can create the light. So you don't have to paint the midtones to represent the volume with glazes, because you will lose your time painting on something that you can't see. Because then when you paint the edge highlights, you will remove or repaint a high percent. So go straight to paint the edge highlights, and then if you have enough room to continue painting inside, do it. But follow this process, follow this way to do it. First, define the dark linings, then the edge highlights, and then if you have the possibility to paint again another edge highlight, perfect, to create this volume. And then if you feel that you continue having room, it's the moment to paint inside, in the middle, to create these midtones. For example, on that kind of leather, if you remember well, or if you can see, I've defined it with the edge highlights. But now I'm repainting again. Why? Just because this is a sketch. So you can't go straight to the end. It's not a goal. The idea is enjoy painting and just check and move and repaint to create more and more information, and you have to enjoy and like this information. So as you see, I repainted everything, but for example now, as you are watching, I repainted again everything. Why? Because now I think that I need something else. At the beginning, this information that I made was okay, was perfect, because I didn't have something else around that to compare and feel if I like it, if I need something else. But now I have more information around that. So now I can see if I need more light or if I need to define better. So it's just repaint, just that. For that reason, the capibase, it's perfect, because you don't have to use something to remove. It's just load your brush, paint again another layer, and done. Just that, easy. And this video tutorial, it's focused on the edge highlights, because to me it's super important. It's the technical part that usually you forget. So remember, the dark linings and edge highlights, super important. The edging, it's super important. For example, now I'm painting this wood or stick, and it's completely different than the spear. I want to represent wood again, but I don't want to represent exactly the same tree or exactly the same material. So for that reason, I started with a texture, but completely different. You can see that looks thicker, looks different at the end. So this is the idea. You have to represent information, but never you should copy or repeat the same technique. If you want to use the same technique or the same brushstroke, you have to add something different. You can start with something bigger and keep it with bigger sides every brushstroke. You can start with lines, you can start with something similar but with something different. So never exactly the same. And for sure, the most important is if you start with something similar or exactly the same, the most important will be that at the end have to be completely different. Okay, completely different. It's if it's another material, but if it's similar, you can play with something similar, but have to look different. For example, now on the leather, on this pad, the idea is paint the edging, both sides, the top and the bottom. And just with that, I defined everything. So it's done. So then it's just create a texture and it's done. You don't have to add something else. For sure, because this model is to a big contest and I want to represent my best level, I want to continue working on that. But the truth is, only with this, it's done. Then if you add more information, much better, because it's more and more and more information. This is just with lines. And make this volume. Be careful when you paint the bottom light lining, because you have to draw this lining. And now something more interesting, because I want to represent something different on that. I want to show you a different way to represent non-metallic metal. This is just an example to show you that you have a lot of ways to do it. You don't have only one way to do it. You have a lot of them. So for that, in that case, I decide to focus on something different. I don't want to represent just the non-metallic metal as material. I want to focus my attention on the brights from this material. So I want to create something like shiny on this. So be ready to this. I start to play with two edges, just that, with one with light and the other one without light or less light, just to get this contrast in the same material. And then I create a texture because this is a spear, so I like to use as a weapon, not completely clean, smooth, perfect. And then it's the moment when you have all the volume on this, it's the moment to start to create this effect, this bright. So you will see. As you see, I start to add something with yellow inside. Why? Because I want to play with this temperature. I want to get something to bump it up the light. So in that case, I play with this kind of grays, but some of them, as you can see, some of them warmer and some of them colder. And I repaint the edging because I need it. So maybe I don't repaint everything, but I repaint 30%, for example, or 40. It's depends of what area. And I start to create these tiny dots to represent these brights. Some of them bigger, some of them tiny, because on the biggers I'm going to repaint again to paint inside something with more white, or maybe pure white, to get this contrast. So now you start to see this kind of bright tinies. And one tip I can give you, when you have a sword or you have something like this that it's easy paint both sides at the same time, do it. Because if you don't paint the back and you only paint the front view, then you won't have exactly the same mixes, you are tired, and maybe you won't paint with the same So now with this kind of whites, you can see the result. These kind of brights I want to represent on this material, just to represent a different way to do it, because not everything is the same. So you see, you can continue adding something else. So I hope you enjoy this different way to paint non-metallic metals. And it's super easy, so you should test, you should check, you should try to do it. And with the next layer, I paint again, same places, edging and some places in the middle. And now I'm going to explain you something new. I'm going to use masks to paint something. So are you ready for that? I'm going to use my blade to cut this. And some of you will think why I didn't use a roller or something to cut perfectly. Just because I don't care. I'm going to use just both sides. The area where the machine cut this, not the place I cut this mask. So I'm going to use the perfect sides to cover perfectly the area where I need to create a straight line. And the other side is just to cover, so I don't care how it is. I stick first this tip on a gum, on your clothes, on something first, than your miniature, and then just that. It's just to remove a bit the glue that have the type. And then the most interesting part, the airbrush. So I'm going to explain you the mix, the dilution, the water and the thinner. You have to count every drop. This is the magic. This is the perfect dilution. It's just mix a bit of water with a bit of mixer, a bit of thinner, just that. So don't worry about the percent of one of the or the other one. And then I usually mix a bit on my paper towel, on my wet palette, the mix, and then I continue mixing the colors inside of my cup. Why? Because if I don't use these mixes inside of my airbrush, maybe will look a bit different on the wet palette. So at the beginning, I mix on my wet palette, I check, I like it, perfect, it's time to add to my airbrush. And then if it looks a bit different or I don't like it too much because it's different background, so you could see a bit different the colors. So it's the moment to add something else and then just blend with the airbrush. In that case, the dilution is not like a 90% water and thinner and 10% paint, but it's similar. Maybe it's 70-30 or 75-25, something like that. So every layer thin and then another layer, just that. If you feel or you see that some places are shiny, glossy, a bit satin, are wet. So be careful with this, because if you paint over that, it's the moment when you could paint spiders, and we hate them. So you don't want to paint spiders on your model with your airbrush. You have to dry perfectly the surface. If you can't see if it's flat, because your paint it's like, for example, inks, that the result is satin or maybe shiny or glossy, so move to another place to paint with the airbrush and keep it some time, some minutes or seconds to dry the surface, and then paint again with another layer. Just that, because if you paint on a surface where it's wet, this area can absorb more paint and more water, so it's the moment that you should paint the spiders. So it's just that, just paint one layer, dry the layer, paint another one, and if you can't see if it's dried, just move to another place or keep it some time, or use the hair dryer. With this will be perfect. Why I decide to use the airbrush for that? Because I want to represent a completely different and new material. If you compare with the rest of the materials, you will see that have texture, will have something different, but anyone I painted with the airbrush. So the result will be completely different. So this is more interesting because could look like I didn't paint with enough information. For that reason, I'm going to use a freehand then. But now it's perfect as a background because it looks completely different. Looks like a manufactory, like someone made it. It's more synthetic, so it's perfect to this material. And just that, is layer over layer over layer. Just that, don't have any trick. And this is just the background to explain you in the next video tutorial how I painted the freehand and how I continue blending with the airbrush to represent everything. So if you don't want to lose the next video tutorial, I hope you can see the next one and enjoy as you have enjoyed watching all of this, because this is the end. We are in the last steps. So I hope you have enjoyed watching this, and see you in the next video tutorial or streaming. I don't have anything more to say than thank you very much for this huge support, because this is amazing project. This is huge, and without your help will be impossible. So thank you again, thank you very much, and see you in the next video tutorial and enjoying with this project. Remember that at the end we will do a really huge book, digital book. So see you in the next one. Bye bye.